Hi, this is Jarish. Welcome to Ekascloud and this webinar. This webinar is about Ansible automation, and it is a series of webinars. In my previous webinar, I have explained what is Ansible and how to get started with Ansible. And also, I have told you how to manage static inventories. In this webinar, I'm going to explain what is Ansible project directory, how to create it. We'll talk about ad hoc commands and executing ad hoc commands with SSH password. Also, I'll do an initial setup for Ansible, and I'd use Linux as the manage nodes. This is the setup for today's session. I have a Ansible control node, and I have logged into it as admin user. And I have two Linux servers, which is going to act as managed nodes. First of all, we will manage Ansible configurations and inventory. Then at the end of this session, we'll see how to execute ad hoc commands to these Linux managed nodes. We will use Windows in a separate session. So this control node is like a newly installed Linux server with Ansible. If I use Ansible -- version, Ansible 2.9.24 is installed. Other than installing Ansible, I have not did any changes to this control node. In my previous session, I have told you just after installing Ansible, inside /etc Ansible, there will be an Ansible configuration file, which is considered as the main configuration file. And this configuration file will have a configuration pointing to /etc/Ansible/hosts as the main inventory file. In today's session, I'm not going to edit the main Ansible configuration file or the inventory file. So if you look into the configuration file, there may be no changes. It's pointing to the default inventory file. And similarly, if you look into the default inventory file, which is /etc Ansible hosts, today I don't have any entries about any managed node. All the lines in this file are commented. First of all, I'll explain what is project directory. Like I said earlier, if you are in a large enterprise and if you have a lot of departments and making entry about all the managed nodes in the main inventory file is going to expose the IP address or name to multiple teams. So it is always recommended to create project directory. So instead of using the main configuration file and the main inventory file, you can create a directory in your Linux operating system anywhere, and that directory is going to act as the project directory for a specific team. You can create a directory with any name. So for example, /Linux, and you can create configuration file and inventory file for managing maybe Linux servers. You can create a project directory with the name, for example, Windows, and you can create configuration files and inventory for managing Windows. Again, it's up to you. It is possible to put all managed nodes in a single project directory as well. So in today's session, I'll create a project directory in the admin's home directory. So I have logged in as a user called admin, and I am in admin's home directory /home/admin. I don't have any directories inside this home directory. I'll create a directory with a name called project. This directory is going to act as the Ansible project directory. You can create with any name, like I said earlier. So now I'm inside the project directory. So in this directory, so I'm going to create a configuration file with the name ansible.cfg. In this project directory, I'll create a configuration file with the name ansible.cfg. It should be ansible.cfg. So we saw in the main configuration file there was more than 400 plus lines, but this is an Ansible configuration file just like I'm creating, and as of now I'm just going to make only one entry. I'll create a section with the name defaults, and I'll say inventory equal to, and the path where I'm going to create the inventory file. So I'll say /home/admin/project/inventory. So we just created the directory project, and I'm creating ansible.cfg now. We don't have any file with this name, but once I save this configuration file, I'm going to create an inventory file in this path. Because this ansible.cfg is already inside the project directory, even instead of mentioning the absolute path, you can just say the inventory is going to be inside the current directory. But it's not mandatory to have the inventory file within the Ansible project directory. You can create the inventory file anywhere. But I'm just going to create inside the project directory. So I'll say /inventory. It means it's in the current directory. So I just created a configuration file with 2 lines saying, pointing where is the inventory file. And now I'll create an inventory file with the name inventory. And we have seen what are all the methods we can make entry about the managed nodes in our previous webinar. But just to be very simple, in today's session, in this inventory file, I'm just going to make entry about the 2 managed nodes which I have. I have not connected to it, I have not logged into it, but it's running in the background. So I'm just going to copy the IP address of the 2 managed nodes, and I'll enter in the inventory file. Yeah, this is the ungrouped entry. If you want, you can group it. these two managed nodes are running with Red Hat Enterprise Linux 8. So I can use a group name as rel. So now we have a project directory with the name project, and I have two files. One is ansible.cfg, which has a configuration pointing about the inventory, and I have also created an inventory file and which have entry about the managed nodes which I have. So now after creating this project directory, so in total you have two Ansible configurations and two inventory files. One is the main Ansible configuration file, which comes just after installing Ansible, and the one which I created now in project directory. And you have two inventory files. One is the main file which comes just after installing Ansible, which is /etc/ansible/hosts, and the another inventory file which I created in the project directory. So now we have two configuration files and two inventory files. So when we execute the automation commands, ad hoc commands, or maybe the playbooks in the future, so it's going to check any one configuration file. So there is order of checking the configuration files. So when you execute the ad hoc commands or the automation, when you're running the playbook, so it checks the configuration file in a order. First, it will check whether the ansible.cfg file is in the current directory, which means if you are within the project directory and if you are using any ad hoc commands or playbook or even a verification command like we discussed earlier, so I'll use Ansible all -- list -host just to verify the entries which I made in the inventory file. So because I'm inside the project directory, it's going to read the ansible.cfg file which is within the project directory. So first it will check whether the configuration is in the current directory. If I come out from the project directory and if I try executing it, it is going to check whether the ansible.cfg file is in the current directory, but it's not. So then it will check the home directory for a file called .ansible.cfg. But we have not created any file in the home directory starting with .ansible.cfg. We don't have any files with .ansible.cfg. So then it will check for the main Ansible file. So by this order of checking the configuration file, what I am trying to explain is if you are within the project directory and if you are executing the verification command or ad hoc command or playbooks, it's going to use the configuration within the project directory. If you come out from the project directory and if you execute the ad hoc commands or playbooks, it will check whether there is a configuration file in the home directory, which is a hidden file .ansible.cfg. If it is not there, then it will work based on the main configuration file. Little earlier, when I was inside the project directory and when I verified, it uses the configuration file within it and it prints the host which we added in the inventory. But if I come out and if I execute the same command, this time it's not going to print the inventory content because it is going to read the main file. And today I have not added any entries in the inventory file. So it says 0, host entries are 0. So now you know what is project directory, how to create a very simple project directory just pointing about the inventory file, and you know how Ansible looks for the configuration file in the order. So even if you're outside the project directory, but still if you want to exactly point the inventory file, that is a command. You can use it for Ansible verification command, add or command, or playbook. So Ansible, the host name or the group name, -i, and you can point the inventory file even if you are outside the project directory. So this time I'll use Ansible all -i, and I'll point the inventory file which I created in the project directory. So when we exactly point the inventory file using -i option, it overrides the order of checking the configuration. It overrides all other inventory files. And it is also possible to verify which Ansible configuration is used when you have a lot of project directories by using Ansible -- version, or when you are executing the Ansible command, you can use -v at the end of the command. Okay, so now if I go inside the project directory and if I use Ansible -- version, you can see the configuration file is pointing to the configuration which I created. But if I come out from the project directory and if I use Ansible -- version, it's going to use the main Ansible configuration file. So you have to be always aware from where you are executing your Ansible ad hoc commands and playbooks. So now we have did a very basic configuration about project directory. Now we can move on to ad hoc command. So in these 3 sessions, I have not typed any automation command up to this. So we are going to get started with our first automation related commands. First of all, we'll understand what is ad hoc command. Ad hoc command means whenever needed. If you want to execute a single automation to multiple managed nodes or maybe a single managed node using the modules which you have within the Ansible, then you can use ad hoc command. So from your Ansible control node to your managed nodes, if you are executing a single automation, that we call it as a play. If you are using it as using a command, if you are typing, then it's called ad hoc. So now I'll explain the syntax of ad hoc command. So now I'll go inside the project directory because I want to execute the Ansible ad hoc or maybe the playbook in the future always within the project directory. So from within the project directory to execute the ad hoc command, the syntax is Ansible host name or the group name which we have added in the inventory. Then with -m we have to use a module. For some modules or very few modules, just by typing the modules, it is going to execute the ad hoc command. It's like in a Linux command line, if you just type a command, it will execute. Very similarly, just by typing the module name, that module is going to execute in the managed node. So there are some modules like ping, setup. Without even typing some arguments, you can able to execute. But there are some modules, most of the modules, which you have to use arguments with -a option. In Linux command line, if you just type mkdir, it's not going to create anything. You have to maybe use a directory name. Only then mkdir can create a directory. Very similarly, in Ansible adhoc command, when you are executing an adhoc command, just by typing the module, it's not going to execute the adhoc. You have to use the arguments. For example, there are modules like, for example, user or maybe yum. These modules should have arguments. Only then it can able to execute maybe a task like creating a user or maybe the installing a software in the managed node. At this point, I'm not going to dumb with lot of names. Normally, to get started with Ansible, so it's always the ping module. So I'm going to use the ping module. So the adhoc command is going to be like Ansible, the managed nodes host name or group name. In my case, I have created a group with rel, so I can use rel, or maybe even I can use all. Then -m ping. This is a adhoc command which I am going to use it from my Ansible control node, and I'm within the project directory. It is used to check whether all the managed nodes are up and running. It's not going to use ICMP protocol in the background. Even I have not allowed ICMP traffic to these managed nodes. So when I use adhoc commands or maybe in future playbooks from the control node, it always uses SSH to connect to the Linux managed nodes. For Windows, it's different. For Linux, it's by default going to use SSH protocol to connect to the managed nodes. So I have allowed SSH traffic to these two managed nodes from this control node. So from this control node, I will be able to establish a SSH session to these two managed nodes. So when I use this command, in the background, it uses SSH to connect to the managed node. But this is not going to work as of now. If I type this command, so normally when you are trying to establish a SSH session, it will ask, are you sure you want to continue connecting? Very similarly, it is asking to type yes. So as of now, I'll cancel this. I want to mainly show you a lot of errors and the fixes in this session. So I'll tell you what is happening. So from the control node, after making entries about the managed nodes, if you try doing a SSH, by default SSH works with password-based mechanism to the managed Linux nodes. Similarly, when you type adhoc command from within the control node, it uses SSH in the background. So still it is asking for, are you sure you want to continue connecting? So it is behaving like how we do SSH for the first time. If we want to ignore this message, are you sure you want to continue connecting? We need to add a configuration in the Ansible configuration file saying host underscore e underscore checking equal to no. If I make a configuration in this ansible.cfg as host underscore key underscore checking equal to no, it means it's not going to give the message like, are you sure you want to continue connecting, even if you're typing for the first time. So I'll save this. And now if I again try typing, it's not going to ask, are you sure you want to continue connecting? But still it's not going to connect. The reason is, again, by default, when you're logging into the Linux server using SSH, most of the Linux servers will be with by default password-based authentication. So if you are logging into the remote Linux server, it will be asking for the password. But while using the adhoc command, we have not given the password as an input. So it's not connecting. So we are getting a permission denied message. So if we use -k as an option, this time, like how we do SSH, it will prompt for the password. Very similarly, this add command is also going to prompt for the SSH password, because I told you add uses SSH in the background, or Ansible uses SSH in the background to connect to the manage node. So I'll use this time -k option. So now you can see it is prompting for the SSH password, and you can see here it is actually prompting for the remote user's password. In my remote machine, both my remote machine, I have created a user already with a name called admin, because I have also logged into this Linux server as admin user without specifying anything. By default, it is prompting for the remote admin user's password. So if you have same password for both your managed nodes, then you can enter the password here. So you may have a lot of questions now. What if you have two different users? Or what if you have hundreds of servers? So if you have hundreds of servers, one way is you have to create the same user with the same password in all 100 machines, or you have to have a central authentication server and you have to integrate all your hundreds of server to the central authentication server. So you can just create user only once in the central authentication server. In that way, the remote user can be created only once in the central authentication server. Okay, but in my case, because I have only two managed nodes, I have created a user with the name called admin in both the machines and with the same password. So I'll type the password of the remote user, and now this add command is going to execute successfully. But maybe in a real automation, sometimes it's not going to be always typing the password. So we should ignore the -k option. So like how we can SSH to the remote managed node using keys without password. Very similarly, Ansible add command can also use key-based authentication in the background to connect to the managed node. Then you don't need to type password. That I'll be telling you in a separate session. But now you know how to type the add command using SSH passwords. We'll see one more add command. This command, this add command is very much helpful to verify or maybe execute some basic tasks in the managed node. The second module which I am going to explain is actually command module. So this time I'll use Ansible, because in my inventory I have a group called rel. I use rel -m. Instead of ping, this time I'll use a module called command. But you can't just use command and -k. You have to give a argument, and you have to use the command which is going to execute in the remote nodes. For example, if you want to verify the RAM memory of the managed nodes, you can use free-m. This is a Linux command which we normally type in our Linux command line, but I'm giving that as the argument to the command module. So this time, again, it is going to prompt for the SSH password, because from our control node, it is using SSH in the background to connect to the two managed nodes, and it is because of with password mechanism, we need to type the password to execute this command module. So this command module executes the free-m command in the manage nodes, and it's printing the current memory, used memory swap sizes. You can almost type any Linux command here, which is going to print the output for each and every manage nodes. But it's not a recommended command. We'll talk about that as well. So in this webinar, I have just told you how to create project directory and how Ansible control node establishes session to the remote manage node using with password. And we have also get started with the addo command. But we have typed the password to connect to the manage node. But in our next session, I'll tell you how to create keys and how to use key-based authentication for Ansible. And we'll also talk about some more Ansible modules in detail.